Renato felt a twinge of doubt. Should he have gone to the base? No. Logically, wherever they'd taken Lapino was probably where they took the core, right? Oh, why couldn't Lapino have just, for once, not got himself captured? Was that too much to ask? He shouldn't be too hard on the rabbit. No, he meant well, and he was insanely brave. You had to admire that. This chest contained blank passports from 15 countries. And something useful. There was an inscription on the platform. Balaleka lessons, with an address. Good to practice your moves, thought Renato. Keeps you limber. Where were they holding Lapino anyway? There was no sign of him or the ravens who'd captured him. Just rocks and snow and the usual scouts. No sign of the core either. Was this a wild rabbit chase? Oh, trust Lapino to screw up even getting captured. But what was this rebellion for anyway? Well, Lapino was a useless goof. But he was a friend. If friends didn't matter anymore, what was the point of winning this war? He'd once met a pirate captain. He used hooks to get around his ship. Oh, what was his name again? Renato thought of the choices he had made so far. Rescuing a friend and then sending him to be captured. Recovering a superweapon and letting it fall into enemy hands. Risking an assault on an enemy base for military secrets. And then failing to deliver them to the rebellion. Well, he was alive, at least. Boom! At the end of the mountain path, Bernardo came to a clearing. There was a campfire, raven feathers, and... oh, Lupino's lucky deck of cards. Well, that wasn't good. Bernardo hoped Lupino would not try to cheat his captors at cards. Ravens were much better than weasels at counting, and they had a very poor sense of humor. Then, he saw what he had hoped never to see. Fresh scraps of rabbit fur. Ragged and bloody, ravens would eat anything. By Crabthar's hammer! Bernardo screamed at the sky. I will avenge you! The rebels had assembled their fleet. Ahead, the clouds were dark with Imperial ships. If he could reach the Emperor before the rest of the rebels did, maybe he could settle this without too much bloodshed. He set sail, and the Farfarer shot forward. Poor Lupino had never been a great warrior. The mad rabbit was good for a lark and a laugh. And a pint. The thought of ravens eating him made Bernardo furious. The way they were eating up the land. The way the Emperor was eating up the people with his new, bloodthirsty ways. He would make them all pay. Well, he'd always wanted to do that. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. Of all the artisans he was creating employment for, truly, he was a job creator. Just look at eyeballs! Caught the lead raven. Thank you, I think, said Ronaldo. It never hurt to be polite. Coming back to him. He wondered what he'd remembered. He had given up every objective to save his friend. He had given up the armature, the core, the gem, and even Zenobia. He loved Lupino, he realized. And now the rabbit was gone. A hero looks out for his friends, even when they're gone. He would send Lupino an honor guard of ravens to serve him in the halls of the Valiant. He would avenge him. He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons. Finally, he reached the Emperor's ship. And there was Lupino, surrounded by ravens. He was alive! They'd eaten some other rabbit. "I'll save you!" he shouted with joy and flung himself at the ravens. "Aw, you shouldn't have," said Lupino when the last raven was down. Renato threw his arms around his best friend. "I had to come. I love you, man. You really, really shouldn't have," said Lupino. And Renato felt a rather sharp pain in his back. As he collapsed, Lupino took the dagger out of Renato's back and wiped it off on Renato's sleeve. "Why, you always have to be the hero. Brave Renato, epic Renato, super sexy Renato, and I'm sick of it. But I loved you. And you thought I was the idiot, said Lapino as Renato died. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he just died. Instead, he was on the Farfarer, sailing away from Ubar. And it was still burning. He'd fled burning Ubar years ago, hadn't he? And now he was back there. Had all those years fighting the Empire been nothing but a vision into the future? A useful vision if it was true. He'd learned something. Lapino was a traitor. Renato had suspected there was something wrong with the Mad Rabbit. But now he knew there was malice behind his goofiness. He'd made bad choices. But now, when the real battle came, he wouldn't make those choices. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The book's pages began to flip backwards, towards the beginning. And he realized that his adventure was just beginning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces. What could have brought them to light? This Emperor, Isengrim III, had once been kind, but he'd gone mad. And now he was conducting secret, obscene rituals to bring back the lost gods. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the earth? It was more than Renato could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? I wonder what I could make with all these sword crafting materials, thought Renato. I'll just have a dash, thought Renato.
Say goodnight, Gracie, said Renato, wondering who Gracie was.
The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Haven't you always wanted to do that? Hero Wall, Hero Sword, Ice Wall, Ice Cube. Dreams may come, he thought. And then he found out. Sharp? Check. Pointy? Check. Flexible? Check. What else do you need in a sword? Well, the eyes have had it. Those sheaths were really very well made, weren't they? That had been his mistake before, trusting his old friend Lapino, who'd been through so many battles with him and shared so many heartaches, who he'd rescued so many times. What was up with that guy anyway? There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. What were these poles exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods? There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead.
Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Renato, a little smug.
There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be. Boy, if only he had some sort of gun that made war. Of course there was a puzzle. You couldn't expect the transcendent emperor to bury a god's eye in a leather sack where anyone could pick it up. He wasn't that good. Yet. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus.
Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend.
Yeah, that made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of superweapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Well, of course. If you've just assembled a weapon out of legend that can exile gods from the world, you'd want to have a scientist or two look at it. And even if they disagreed and he had time, he could ask Calaveras himself. Yes, the observatory would be his objective. Why had the parts of the Sky Ripper only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had dismantled it? The mad Emperor Isengrim had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Was that why these ancient artifacts were rising out of the ground? How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. That could come in handy in a pinch. Legendary weapon was exactly what the rebellion needed. They were outnumbered, The once kind Emperor had become a tyrant. But his ravens stayed loyal, for he fed them his victims, and the other animals were too frightened to rebel. Renato shuddered at what the Emperor was trying to do. To bring back the lost gods, the Black Harvest, the Black Sun? No. He would stop that toad, no matter what the risk.
Renato's path was clear. Let the scientists ensure the Sky Ripper was safe to use, bring it to the rebel base, and then assault the Imperial fleet for the win. It was a bit windy up here. Some people are just liable to explode if you upset them. I think this is yours, said Renato. But he couldn't hear his enemy's answer. Renato was thrilled. The scientists seemed to think he'd put the Sky Ripper together right. But one toad was worried.
Yeah, the Sky Ripper could tear a hole in existence itself. There are invisible strings that tie the universe together. If the Sky Ripper cut one, the hole would widen and widen until our whole existence fell into it.
Another toad sighed.
Irving still believes in string theory.
At least go see Calaveras.
Yeah, said the worried toad.
He knows more than anyone else has forgotten about the Transcendent Emperor.
If anyone could tell him how to use this weapon safely, it would be Calaveras. It was he who had told Renato how to find it in the first place. But maybe he had to give up on using it as a weapon. Maybe he had to go to the secret rebel base and ask the generals there what he could do with a weapon that he dared not use. Well, he should have known he'd have to consult Calaveras again. The scientists at the observatory were smart enough. But what did they know of the Transcendent Emperor? He hoped it wouldn't delay him too long. The rebels had scheduled the final battle soon. Every day they delayed risked the exposure of the secret base. And some soldiers were already drifting back to their homes and families. Calaveras would fix the Sky Ripper for him. And then he would win the final battle.
Maybe it was the cold. But after a few steps, Renado's optimism started to slump.
What if Calaveras couldn't help? Did Renado dare use the Sky Ripper? Oh, he hated that he had chosen this path. It was so much simpler to rescue friends and attack enemies. Even if some of those friends were more trouble than his enemies, some of those enemies had been friends before and might be lovers after. No, okay, it wasn't all that much simpler, no. Physics made his brain hurt. That, at least, he was sure of.
That was always a rush. Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. He would be cursing a blue streak.
Tried to focus on the now. The ravens who seemed everywhere all the time. Where did they hatch from? Were there raven chicks? Yeah, Calaveras would help. He would make Renado feel better about using the Sky Ripper. And then Renado wouldn't have to worry about ravens ever again.
Renato was remembering all his old tricks, and some new ones. He really ought to ask for a raise.
That was new. Most people still use doorknobs.
The rebels were counting on Renato. He hoped Calaveras knew what he was doing. Calaveras had never let him down.
Yeah, of course I can make it work better.
But when Renato explained about the strings, Calaveras grew thoughtful.
Oh, strings, you say? Well, the Arcana do speak of the ties that bind the world.
He drew many intricate symbols in the dirt.
Yeah, so, according to my calculations, each time you fire, I'm afraid there's a 1 in 120 chance you'll destroy the universe.
That's pretty good odds. That's like rolling, what, 21 dice and they all come up 6. What are the odds of that?
What? No! It's more like 2.716s in a row.
Anyway, with those odds, it won't happen if I use it just once.
What? No. That's so not right. Each time you use it... Okay, look. Just don't use it ever. At all, okay?
All right, I guess.
As he sailed away from the mountains, Renato could see clouds darkening. Rain? No. Ships. Imperial ships, swarming thick as bees.
This was it. The big battle. They could not afford to lose this one. What if it did not go well? What if he had to use the Sky Ripper? Could he gamble the universe? On the other hand, what were the odds of rolling 21 sixes in a row? The battle was not going spectacularly well. What had the rebels been thinking? They'd been thinking he would bring the Sky Ripper, or the Iblis Stone, or that he'd sideline Zenobia somehow, or turn her. Couldn't he use the Sky Ripper just once? After all, if chances were 1 in 128, that meant he'd for sure be okay the first time. They'd get worse each time he used it, but the first time would be okay, right? He wasn't sure that it was right. So he didn't fire the Sky Ripper. He just brought it along, in case. This sword from the frigid north was really useful for making popsicles and birdsicles. Impatient. What did you do if one of these platforms stalled? Someone had told him the odds didn't change just because you'd had a streak of good luck. His gut told him that was wrong, though, and he always listened to his gut. On the other hand, 128 chances to win, but one of them, he'd destroy the universe. Ooh. That seemed a bit serious. Maybe he could defeat the Emperor without firing the Sky Ripper. Maybe he could bluff, but with a real weapon. Like in cards, when you had 3 knaves, but you pretended you had a fizbin. That could work.
What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship.
Wasn't making a dent in those shields.
Set up the Sky Ripper and let it warm up. He would bluff if he had to. Zenobia came out, flanked by a very daunting platoon of ravens. You won't actually use that, she said in that annoying, I know everything because I'm a cat and you know nothing because you're just a fox voice she had. Or I know the odds. Good. Because there's a real chance you could destroy the universe. No, not the first time I use it. The odds are too low. What? No? Yeah, sure. The first time, the odds are practically nothing. They only go up if I use it a bunch more times. No, but that's not how odds work. Didn't you pay attention in class? Now surrender, or I'll use it. Just once, he said. Don't.
He felt sure the odds were with him. He had to go with his gut. That's what heroes do. Fire, he said. Please? The Sky Ripper fired. With a tremendous whoosh, the Emperor's flagship went up in flames. It was awesome. Then he noticed.
There was a hole in the air. A blackness, like a tear in a parchment. Wind was blowing into it, widening it. It grew larger, and even larger. Crates fell upwards into it, and the world itself seemed bent, like the reflection on a curved mirror, as it poured into the ravenous hole. 1 in 128. What are the odds? Thought Reynardo, and then everything fell into the hole and was gone.
Reynardo stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. and still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learn another true thing. The core was powerful, but dangerous if used improperly. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis Stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis Stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? This chest was really awesome. See what I did there? Bernardo distrusted doors that opened automatically, especially after being buried for millennia. Was this some sort of trap?
Say hi to gravity for me.
Bernardo at hot potato.
The Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late.
Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in the buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?
A crafting bench? What kind of sword could he make now?
Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?
Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?
Well, no sense collecting more materials. It was time to make something pointy. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now?